Hey guys, it's Courtney, and today's video is part of a YouTube hop to celebrate 500 subscribers for my very good friend Amanda from Rise and Procraftinate. All of the information for the hop as well as the giveaway will be listed in the description box below. So I'm going to be using the Extra Sweet Easter stamp set by Simon Says Stamp, and I have two card bases here. One that's a traditional A2 size card base with heavyweight cardstock, and one that is regular 80-pound Nina Solar White, and I just trimmed a little bit off the top and a little bit off the side just so that it fits inside of the other one, and you'll see why in a bit. So I'm going to take the 80-pound one and I'm going to flip it around. So I'm stamping what will be the inside of the card. I'm going to stamp out this larger image with blackout ink by Ink on 3 because it is a Copic safe ink. And I'm going to show you the coloring, but I kept it super simple, and I did speed it up a little bit more than I normally do because I don't really want to focus on the coloring for this particular card. So I'm only going to be using two colors for the grass, and I'm pretty much just going along with the lines of the image itself, starting off with the G02, which is actually the darkest color, and it's a fairly light green. I want everything to be kind of Easterish, springish, pastel-y-ish. And then I'm just going to blend that out a little bit with the G00, which is just a little bit lighter. Next, for the sky, I'm going to be using 3 different blues, but again, keeping them very light. I didn't want to have to do any masking for this to do ink blending, or else I would have, but as you can see, it's a pretty intricate image, so I figured I'll just do some ink blending. So I'm starting off with the B01, and I'm just going to add a little bit where the grass will meet the sky, and I am using some flicking motions just to make my blending a little bit easier. Then I'm going to bring out the B00, and I'm just going to extend that out a little bit further up. This is pretty much just going to fade to white once everything is said and done. Then instead of picking up the B000, I accidentally picked up the B01 again, and I started to color that in and realized, oh, that's way too dark. So I lightened that up by using the B000. Remember, the lighter the color, the more it will act as a colorless blender, and I just lightened that area up as much as I could. Now, because it acts as a colorless blender, it's moving the color, which means it moved that color right into my little bunny. But I'm not too concerned about that right now. I am just going to take a colorless blender and kind of try to push that color where it needs to be in the background into the sky. Let it dry as I move on to some of my other coloring, and then I'll keep doing that until the blue is hardly noticeable. Once I color over it, you'll never know the difference. So moving on to this little wagon here, I'm going to move on to some E30 markers. And again, I'm not going overly dark here. If you've ever watched my videos before, you'll know that I like to use a scary dark color in order to get a lot of contrast with my coloring. In this case, I skipped it because I want everything to be fairly light, and I'm not really looking for the coloring to be the star of the show. It's mainly how the fun folds. That's the theme of the hop. So as you guys probably know, that's not exactly my strength. I'm pretty much a one-layer card type of girl. And although I admire all of the fun folds and interactive cards that you guys create, I'm just not good at it. So I kept this one pretty simple. So I'm just finishing up the wagon here with the E30 and realized there was hardly any contrast at all. So I went back in with that darkest color and just added a little bit more without blending it out. And this will give you a little bit more contrast. I'm going to go ahead and push a little bit more of that color out. My bunny is still blue, so I'm going to push that out a little bit more. Again, let that dry before I color in the bunny. Now I can go ahead and start coloring in all of the little jelly beans and the eggs that are in the little wagon there. And I'm pretty much sticking with 3 color blends. I typically use 4 or 5 sometimes, but like I said, keeping it nice and simple. I usually even go right in with my lightest color first to saturate the paper and to map out my darkest areas. Not even bothering to do that. Like I said, the coloring is definitely not the main focus of this card. So once I had a little bit of that coloring done, I figured my blue was light enough where I can go ahead and color my bunny. I want my bunny to be white, but anything white still has shadows. There's still going to be shadows. So I'm going to use some cool gray markers, and I'm just going to add my shadows and blend them out till I still have a lot of white space on the bunny. So I'm going to start right off with my darkest color like I have been, but I'm only going to be adding this very sparingly. Where his little chin is over his body, that's going to create a shadow. I did create a shadow off to the right hand side, and that's mainly just so that I can cover up that blue. Underneath his little arm and his one little ear is folded over. So I'm going to add a little bit of a shadow there where it's actually folded. Then I'm going to bring in my C3 and I'm just going to blend these areas out a little bit further. I also created a shadow above his little nose there where his nose would be sticking out from his face. Then I am adding a little bit of the C1. And now the C1 is the lightest C marker that I have. I do have a C00, but it's completely dry. And like most of us, I'm on a spending freeze right now, so I will not be getting any refills anytime soon. So I'm working with what I have for now. But I have a harsh line where that C1 meets the white area. So I'm just going to take my colorless blender and quickly go over where the C1 meets the white space, and that will kind of smooth that out and give you more of a seamless blend. Added a little bit of pink to the inside of his ears with an R00, which again is a lot lighter than I normally go, but I wanted to keep everything fairly light. For the little flowers and leaves here that are on the wagon, I didn't even bother to do any shading with those at all. They're pretty tiny, and if you are looking to do a really intricate scene and your coloring is the star of the show, then I would probably do a little shading, but in this case, I'm not really worried about it. So you can see that I'm just kind of digging through my colors here and picking out all different pastel colors to color in the eggs. You'll also notice that I'm coloring right over the little polka dots that are on the eggs. I'll fix those with a colorless blender later. You can certainly color around them if you choose and even add some shading to the dots, but I don't have the patience for that today. So I'll just fill those in with a colorless blender later on. So just finishing up the little eggs here, and then for the little chicks, I am going to obviously use some yellows for them, but in order to shade with yellow, because yellows can be really tough in order to get contrast, it's hard to get contrast with those, you usually want to bring in either an E marker or a YR marker. In this case, I am going to bring in a YR04 for my darkest color, but once they're colored, that will also be the color of their little beaks. So I'm just going to add a teeny tiny bit of that orange color and then blend that out with the yellows. And that way I can get a little bit of contrast. If you just stick to yellows, sometimes it can be a little difficult to get that contrast that you're looking for. So once the coloring was all done for the inside of the card, and I apologize, I forgot to zoom out right away, but I am going to go ahead and stamp my sentiment for the inside of the card. And again, I am going to use my Misty for this because at this point I don't want to mess up, but I don't want to have to stamp this twice either because obviously it's a folded card and it keeps unfolding on me. So I am using VersaFine Onyx Black ink. Typically that gives a really good impression and you only have to stamp that once. It is a fast drying pigment ink, but it does take a minute or two to completely dry. You can smudge it. So I am just going to go ahead and put this aside. Next, I'm going to work on my main card base, I guess you could say, and I am going to bring out a piece of pattern paper, and this came from the Scrapping for Less card kit because I don't hold on to my pattern paper. I rarely use pattern paper, but I have this in my stash, one of the very few pieces of pattern paper I have in my stash, and I went ahead and cut that with a stitched rectangle die and lined that up on my card base, stamped out this little chick popping out of the egg, and I'm going to run this through my die cutting machine with a stitched circle die. Keep that stitched circle die out though because we will need that again. I am going to skip the coloring for this because I pretty much colored it the same way, even with the same color combinations as I did for the inside of the card. So now that that is colored, we can kind of line everything up. So you'll see that first I added the white gel pen details. That's what I did. Then we're going to go ahead and create the front of our card, because that pattern paper is not really the front. So I am bringing out a hillside border die, and this is by Lawn Fawn. And again, I am going to be using that circle die, same circle die as I used for the image. I'm going to go ahead and line up that border die and the circle wherever I want that little chick to be, and use some Post-it note tape to tape that down before running that through my Gemini. So as you can see, everything is starting to come together and make a little sense now. So I am going to go ahead and adhere the colored little mini scene that we created to the inside of the card. I recommend using wet glue. That way it gives you a couple of seconds to move things around if needed. So I'm just going to add a little bit of the Tombow Mono Multi Glue to the back of my little scene and stick that to the inside of the card. So your regular card base opens and closes like normal, but this card base is actually backwards. So it's going to open and close from the right side. And that little flap is going to go over the front. Then I'm going to take more of that Tombow Mono Multi Glue and adhere my little chick there right to the inside of my circle, my second circle die. Then I'm going to go ahead and stamp out my front sentiment, or just my Happy Easter, again using some Tombow Mono Multi Glue. Listen to me. VersaFine Onyx Black ink, and added a little shimmer to my little chick as well as the little egg it's popping out of, and that is it. That's the card. As always, I will leave the supplies listed in the description box below, along with all of the details for the hop as well as the next stop on the hop. Thank you guys so much for stopping by, and have a great day. Bye.